Hi everyone, today I'm going to use the Stonehenge oil paper to have a great oil pastel showdown. So this paper by Stonehenge is quite new. It's 100% cotton and 140 pounds. It's going to be great to use with oil pastels, and you can also use it with oil paint. You don't need to prime it. It's all ready to use. The texture is really nice and soft, and I really like it. It almost feels like touching cloth. As promised, this showdown is between the Caran Neopastel oil pastels and the Holbein oil pastels. And I used the Cretacolor oil pencils for my sketch because they glide well on the paper and I really like them for sketching. I was trying to figure out what to draw to compare the two oil pastel brands, if I was going to draw two different drawings of the same subject or use them both on one, and I found this really cool picture on Unsplash, and I'll put the link of the photo in the description box. I thought that drawing a cluster of tomatoes would be really good because I could draw one tomato with one brand and the other one with the other brand, and for this instance I have two colors since the cluster includes red tomatoes and green tomatoes, so it's great practice and it should allow me to really feel the difference between the two pastels, or rather the two brands. Now this cluster has quite a few tomatoes, so it's great because I'll be able to practice and get a feel for them and get more and more practice so that I will not be biased from one tomato to the other or from one brand of pastels to the other, because I can go back and forth from one brand to the other as I'm getting more and more warmed up. I hope this makes sense. So the first tomato was done with the Neopastels by Caran, and just the first application was so nice. They felt really creamy, but not so creamy that I can't add too many layers. They blend really well. So I was basically able to do whatever I wanted with them. It was easy to correct my mistakes, add more layers on top. Very nice and fun to use. I used cotton swabs to do some blending, and my fingers also. The second tomato was done with the Holbein oil pastels, and when I started putting the pigments down, it felt a little drier, not as soft. But as I kept on working with them, they were really nice and soft and creamy, and as I added more and more layers, I ended up having a very similar experience as with the Neopastels. So when I did the third tomato, I used the Neopastels again, and they felt drier than the Holbein, which is funny because I had just thought the same thing of the Holbein. And I think it's because that first application on the white paper has more resistance because of the paper grain, and that's why the pastels feel drier, not as creamy, but as you add more layers, then you have already some thickness. So I think they're pretty much both the same consistency, or they're as dry and creamy. They both feel very similar, and I think some colors are creamier than others, but overall they're all pretty consistent. I like using the sharp corners of the square Holbein pastels. It's great for details, it helps a lot. However, they do not stay sharp for very long because they get used up quite fast. So in the end, it's nice to have sharp corners, but it only lasts for a little bit. So it's up to you when you use them, and it goes with the round pastels too, to kind of rotate your pastel so you can keep building some sharper corners to add details when you need it. I really like the fact that the Neopastels are wrapped. It really keeps the whole process clean, because with the Holbein, all the pigments from one pastel gets transferred to my hands, and then from my hands to another pastel, which, you know, if you're wearing gloves wouldn't make any difference because the pigments would still be transferred from one pastel to the other through you holding them, whether you're gloved or not. So I found that a little annoying, but they are actually quite easy to clean. You can just wipe them off with a paper towel, it comes right off. Another way that makes the process a little messy is that the pigments get transferred also when you blend the pastels together. So you have to be careful. When you go over a previous layer, you will have some transfer from the paper to your pastel stick. So if you do not want to carry that color onto another area of your drawing, make sure that each time you change spots, you clean your pastel. So for instance, with the red tomatoes, if I use a lighter yellow to blend the darker reds, I'm going to have some red on my yellow stick. And if I want to add more yellow in the yellow area, I have to make sure that I have removed that red on my stick first, otherwise I'm going to put some there. So throughout the whole drawing, I had paper towels everywhere, some to wipe my hands off, some to wipe the sticks off, just to make sure that I kept things clean. Because I did make that mistake quite a few times. You get carried away drawing and you're not careful. It's easy to fix, but you know, it's an extra step that you could probably do without. One thing that I had problem with when I was using the Holbein pastels is that my layers were getting messy really fast, or dirty I should say, and I don't know why. I was able to fix it. Sometimes I would just add some white over it because it would cover the mess, and then I could add more colors on top of that. But again, I really don't know why that happened. I didn't seem to have that same problem with the Caran ones. Maybe they're slightly softer. I really don't know. Also, I broke 3 Holbein sticks while using them, and I'm not sure if it's because I was pushing harder on them, which would lead me to believe that I pushed harder on them because they were not as soft as the Neopastels. Again, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it's their shape that makes them more fragile, but in any case, it doesn't really matter. You can still use them even if they're broken. Once the tomatoes were done, I started working in the background, and since I had used the brands separately so far, I decided to use them together to see how well they would work together for the background. So I started with a black Neopastel, and I toned it down with a dark green Holbein stick. They worked very well together, they blended very nicely. While using them together, I didn't really see any difference. Sometimes I added layers with the Neopastel, sometimes I added them with Holbein, and they work great together, that's for sure. I did the blending with my fingers for the bigger areas. For the smaller, more detailed areas, I used cotton swab. I had also taken out my blending stumps, but I totally forgot to use them. At some point I was annoyed by my white Holbein stick that was covered in all different colors, and I decided to try the tip that all the colors in my head, aka Jolie, at least I think that's how you pronounce it, mentioned in the comments that they left in my previous video trying out the Holbein sticks. So I cleaned up that white oil pastel stick, and as you can see with a paper towel it comes right off, and I used some washi tape to wrap it around the stick. I think it's a pretty good idea. It was sticking enough, and I just overlapped the layers. That way the layer at the top of the pastel, I can remove it and still have the other ones underneath. We'll see how that goes. And thank you again for the tip. It was really clever. Alright, so for the final verdict, which brand is better? Well, that's a very good question, and I really don't have an answer because I really enjoyed using both of them, and I really didn't see any major differences while using them on the paper. I like being able to use them together so that you can add more colors to your palette, but since those pastels blend very well, either brand, you can create your own colors by mixing them together. Now, if I could only pick one, which one would I pick? That question is much easier to answer in my opinion. And the answer would be simply the Neopastel. And there are several factors, none of them being the quality of the pastels and how well they work. Because like I said, I really enjoy using both. They work very well, both of them. The pigmentation is exceptional. They blend well, they're creamy. I really like them both. But first, the price factor. That's very important for a lot of people. And while both brands are available open stock, the Neopastels are much easier to find and they're way cheaper. That alone is a huge difference. Second, I really like that they are wrapped. While I could wrap up all my Holbein pastels with washi tape, when I buy art supplies, especially expensive ones, I would like them to be ready to use, and I don't have time to wrap up every single stick so that my hands don't get all covered in pigments and I don't transfer them onto the other pastels. And whenever I'm done drawing with them, I always clean them all up before I put them back in the box. I did the same with the Neopastels, but all I had to do was clean up the tips, not the whole sticks. So they are messy for sure. Also, they broke easily, or at least they seem more fragile than the Neopastels, which didn't break on me. As far as light fastness is concerned, I know it's important for a lot of people. Both brands, according to their packaging, seem to be pretty light fast. However, I know that some of you will tend to trust Caran more than Holbein, and that's perfectly fine. But that's about it for the reasons why I would tend to choose the Neopastels rather than the Holbein. So once the background was done, all I had to do was add the details. And the details you cannot do with the oil pastel sticks. Even with the square ones, they're just too soft and it's not gonna work. And by details, I mean cleaning up the edges of the tomatoes, the outlines, adding the stems, those are really fine, and adding the details on the leaves. So to do that, I used colored pencils. The ones that I picked are the Prismacolor Premier. I don't see why other brands wouldn't work. That's just what I picked, that's all. Now, because your tips are sharp, you will be removing some of the pastels. So, because you're going to be basically digging into those layers, so you will have some residue on your pencil tips. So again, keep a paper towel near you because you're going to need to wipe your pencil very frequently. Also, because adding details is a more precise job, I need more support for my hand, and I use some glassine paper to cover part of my drawing so that I could rest my hand on it. And glassine paper is great for that. However, you need to be extremely careful because some pigments from your drawing will be transferred on the glassine paper. So keep it exactly at the same spot. It should stick to it, but don't move it around because you're going to have some green parts of your leaves, for instance, going on your red tomatoes, and it's going to end up being a mess. So make sure your glassine stays exactly where it is. And if you need to draw underneath, slowly peel it and fold it. And what you can do is use a paper towel to put over that folded part so that you don't transfer the pigments onto your hand. So yeah, using colored pencils really helps to clean up everything, to add sharp and crisp lines, and it ties everything together in the end. That's it for this showdown. I had such a fun time doing it. Being an artist who has used colored pencils for many years, using oil pastels is such a difference because you get immediate gratification. You just put one mark of the pastels on the paper and it just fills up those holes of the paper, and it just like puts so much pigment on it. I was able to draw a tomato in just a few minutes when it would have taken me quite a lot longer using colored pencils. And that's one of the many reasons why I enjoy using this medium. I love the fact that the final drawing actually looks like an oil painting. And it's faster and easier, I believe, than using oils. So yeah, that's it. If you have tried both of them, let me know how you like them and if you have a preference for one brand rather than the other. I'm glad that I got to try both. I'm glad that I have all those Holbein sticks because it gives me more colors to my palette, and I'm glad that I can use them together. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always support this channel by clicking on the thanks button right next to the share button. Thank you all for stopping by. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon with another video. Bye bye!